Thanks very much for that, and lovely to be here. I think wistfully of summers gone by when, schedule permitting, I would pop in on some of the in-person sessions, and just really appreciating the connection and interaction with people, and then also the compelling array of topics and corresponding student work being profiled. So thank you for having me. I'm Bonnie Lashewicz. I will probably know some of you. I am an associate professor in the Community Rehabilitation and Disability Studies specialization within Community Health Sciences. And really, I'm not going to say too much more by way of introduction, given that the title of my talk today is Critical Perspectives on Aging. And I've very much anchored that in critical disability studies theorizing. So I'll just get things going and add sort of details as we go along. Oh my goodness, my screen works differently depending on what moment I hit buttons. At any rate, sorry for that bump. So critical disability studies theorizing, like many of the critical theories related to age, related to race, related to indigeneity, related to a whole host of phenomenon experienced in our social world, is predicated on ideas that the world tends to be designed well for some people and far less well for other people. And so our interest is always in understanding and critically challenging the circulations and structures and processes of power and privilege. And maybe kick off kind of pithy little idea might be this one on the screen from American philosopher William James. And it's just a very shortcut type of reminder that what we value, what constitutes valued citizenship, valued behaviors and activities is very much a product of our socialization, and that so very many things are not inherently truthful or otherwise, but rather that we are conditioned to believe in particular things. And so tethering that across to disability studies theorizing, underlining disability theory as being about an interrogation of what it constitutes normal. And it's a way among many and overlapping with other critical theories, it's a way of critiquing taken for granted assumptions and values and priorities. And as we know, most of our priorities and values and goals are related to some very hegemonic type of middle class white, often masculine and industrialist kinds of norms of what constitutes valued functioning. So I'm opening with this slide with this image for a couple of reasons. The photo credit is at the bottom of my slide, but so there are two things going on in this photo that I want to call to your attention. One is we don't see enough images of wheelchairs in our world, considering that how many people use wheelchairs and considering how many of us will use wheelchairs in the future, for whatever reason. We don't see enough wheelchairs. And so the bigger kind of consideration is, I wish that more images profiled, more images and messages profiled more diversity, including diversity of ability and wheelchairs as being just one way of profiling that. At the same time, I caveat this image because this tends, when we see disability profiling, to be exactly the kind of thing that is brought to us. And it is very athletic people. There have been lots of critical race theorists and critical gender theorists who have pushed back against what they say. We're sick and tired of always having messaging about sexy wheelchair athletes. So just an invitation for you to think about, when we do see representations of disability, what form that tends to take. And, we don't have to think very hard as Canadians about how iconic Terry Fox is to our understanding of ourselves as a nation, of our understanding of disability and our identity of ourselves and as a nation and what we value. And so just thinking about tendencies to profile whiteness, to profile middle class, to profile masculine perspectives, and an invitation to think critically about, don't we all love a prevailing against the odds and overcoming adversity kind of hero story, which is very much the sort of aura that surrounds Terry Fox. And so much about this, and I want to talk to you a little bit about some work that I'm doing. But the invitation that I'm overarchingly issuing to you is to think about which seniors, which kinds of older adults, which old people tend to be, concentrated on, listened to, tend to have, policy and resources structured around. And correspondingly, of course, where are the gaps and where are the missing voices? Where are the suppressed voices? And how can we, as learners, as researchers, as policymakers, and as practitioners, how can we proceed in our work in ways that constitutes a fuller embrace of those missing voices or less apparent voices? And so no surprise to anybody around this table. And I'm conscious too of the hypocrisy embedded in this slide, because it's a critique about how hook, line, and sinker our society, our culture has bought into the valuing of being busy, and how much of a status symbol, a point of pride, our busy schedules have been. There's hypocrisy embedded in my sharing this with you, because I'm really mindful that the academic institution is an environment where people are prized and valued and rewarded for being incredibly busy. If your researchers, probably your supervisor, works 70 or 80 hours a week, and they'll give you a break and let you work 65 or 70 hours a week, kind of idea. So recognizing that, as some critical researchers would say, we're part of the parade that we think that we're watching, and so the ways that we're complicit. But thinking about just this prizing of busyness that we have, and what that can mean for how people who are growing older and their energy and capabilities are shifting across the life course, and what that might mean. And so I just wanted to show you a few images that we've got, these little kind of adornments that signify to the outer world just how very busy and important we are. And so we know that Mark Zuckerberg is on record as saying he's got a closet full of gray t-shirts and gray hoodies, because he's just too important and busy to give any attention whatsoever to his wardrobe choices. And so that's become a sort of a branding that he has in his gray shirt. There's a whole body of scholarship about this phenomenon related to what is termed conspicuous consumption. And this is about, the way that people parade and showcase their devices as signifiers of just how busy and important they are. I had an interview a few years ago with someone who worked in banking, and he came to the interview, and on my desk he put his pager and 2 cell phones. And so it was like the barricade of his devices, and then me and him. So thinking about that, thinking about things like some scholars have written about what they call the red sneaker effect, and that is men who are, it's a phenomenon identified among men who are so busy and so important, but they can really afford to stand out because their social status is so high. And so they can do renegade sorts of things like Mark Zuckerberg in his gray hoodies going to really formal meetings. In this case, it was red sneakers being worn with formal business attire. So thinking about what this means in terms of who we care about when we turn our attention to older adults. And here is, I noticed that as part of the Center on Aging review, Dr. Anne Martin Matthews from UBC will be involved in that process. And I'm showing you, that prompted me to dig back into some files, and I'm showing you an idea that she shared with a group at a presentation of hers that I attended a number of years ago. And she said, pay attention to what the card stores, you know, assuming that we're using cards that are hard copy and not e-cards, pay attention to what the card store is giving shelf space to. And so she talked about looking for birthday cards and how people are surviving into advanced old age, and to such an extent these days that card stores consider it to be lucrative for their merchandising and marketing purposes to dedicate shelf space to happy 100 birthday. So that unto itself, it's a bit like my disability picture at the beginning. There's a big message there that, you know, people are living longer. We care about, you know, people living longer. But just like in the disability picture, we cared about athletic, artistic, you know, beautiful, you know, people in wheelchairs, conventionally beautiful people in wheelchairs. Here, we're seeing a little sample of cards where it's a little bit cheeky and a little bit edgy. And I find in this kind of collection of cards a little bit of subtle messaging that in order to effective, to be valued, and to be highly successful in turning 100 years old, you have to have your sense of humor intact, and you've got to be kind of edgy and you know, things of that sort. So don't just look at the cards and, you know, what number is on them, but look also at the tone of the messaging. And I think there's something in here about the kinds of 100-year-olds we want to pay attention to. And again, it's like Terry Fox, right? Somebody who's defying the odds and still, you know, has a good sense of humor and an intensity or a vitality to them. Thinking about then how to push back against that sort of pull that we have to people who are highly engaged, highly busy, highly, you know, animated, etc. And thinking about the role, the complicity of mainstream research in all of that. And just signaling to your attention that there's a body of work, you may know about this work, about just a critical deconstruction and analysis of the ways that research perpetuates existing social structures and orders. So just some ideas for your consideration as you go forward. Poland and Peterson remind us that again, there's a Western bias, and there is a risk in that of forcing study research participants. In order to be a good participant, you are expected to speak and speak articulately, and those are the people who are quoted in the qualitative research accounts. People who can assemble their ideas in a way that can command attention. connection, and thinking about how other voices that are less articulate, less conventional, can be missed in that process. Keeping an eye on the time here. So related to all of that, I just wanted to show you one example, really briefly, of my endeavor to overcome or to resist this tendency to listen to highly articulate people. Love Durante's 1997 quote here about how our whole world is designed for the best speakers of the standard dialect, and people who speak any other way, or who don't speak, or who speak only with the support of others, or speak less, etc. They're far easier to overlook. And so one of the things I've done in relation to this phenomenon is crafted a study about people who have dementia and how they exemplify their preferences and personalities. And the people with dementia, with whose exemplification of their identity, of their preference and personality, in whom I'm interested, are people with late stage dementia. And so many of you will know that the literature about dementia is largely from the perspective of healthcare providers or support providers, family members, etc. Once in a while, we get some firsthand perspectives in the literature, in the research, from people with early stages of dementia. Occasionally see a little bit, from people in mid-stage, their dementia has progressed to the mid-stage, but very rarely do you see perspectives from people who have very little spoken language remaining and are near the end of their lives. And so this was my endeavor to tap into that area and to try to better understand who people are at those stages of their lives. And so it's a video study because we're needing to pay very careful attention to subtle movement and expression and clenching and tightening and tremoring and so on. And so this is a video study. We were just getting off the ground, and guess what happened? So our on-site data collection was suspended, but we're really excited to go and resume this. And then one of the things we want to produce from this work is we want to video people with late-stage dementia and capture the small movements, the nuances of the movements. And we want to convert this using a software program called Point Cloud into images and movements, moving images. But the images, the still images, will resemble something along the lines of what I'm showing you on the screen here. And it's part of our effort to anonymize, what we are producing from this work, but to come into the sort of fullness of human existence and human experience, and capture that in a way that we think is a little bit novel and kind of high tech and kind of cool. So we want to put some high tech cool around people with late stage dementia, if that makes sense. Okay, just a couple more things. Last two things I wanted to say to you, and then we'll have some time for questions. Just again, thinking about points of view that are underrepresented or missing entirely. I am always such a fan of representations that characterize older people, and particularly older men, in terms of their capability and importance in their nurturing of the younger generations. There's the scholarship about motherhood and grandmotherhood is just massive compared to the scholarship about fatherhood and grandfatherhood. And so just in inviting along a gendered axis to think about elevating and expanding representations of men in nurturing in situations. Some of you may have even read this book as a young person. It's called Something from Nothing. There's a nice religious sort of undertone, kind of belief system structure super operative in the book. So just one of my favorite books. And my second favorite book, not only is this showcasing of men in nurturing ways and roles, this is a showcasing, this is called Waiting for the Whales. And it's a showcasing of a grandfather, but he's not a very talkative, kind of, easy to communicate with kind of guy. He's sort of reserved. And I love this book for the way it captures the quiet power of the relationship between him and his tiny granddaughter, and the way it helps us to think, about the ways that our society can buy into that idea of the cute, sweet, little old person. And it just, one more sort of little facet that reminds me to value always of being an old person, including if those are reserved. And then, of course, across those two slides, my goal is to remind also to start young with the kinds of, diverse engagement in our world. And children's books are just something I try to keep an eye on for that purpose. Finally, closing off, here are some references for you. I'm sorry I didn't space this right. The cross section of the top of the slide there is interrupting one of them. Mostly what I was doing with these is I was trying to condense it to 5. I didn't succeed. You can see that there's 6, but really I just wanted to close off with you about just a few of my favorite things in terms of critical perspectives on aging and critical perspectives on research, and then correspondingly, I think, applicability into critical perspectives on any number of topics. Thank you for your kind attention, and I will pause there and invite questions or comments.